Welcome, everyone. We have a very special program today. We're going to be bringing you guests from Australia, Melbourne, Australia, actually, the USA, in the state of Florida, state of California, Los Angeles. I welcome tonight our special guest, Hristos Vlahonasios. He's the Byzanfest director. Neil Basil DeGraide, he's the director of Queen of the Night, which was nominated. And Alexander Jovic, director of Beyond the Peak, who was also nominated. Let me just introduce the guests first, and then we can get into a little bit of a discussion. Hristos is the festival director, founded the Byzanfest in 2014 with the goal to stream and screen the very best Orthodox stories and share them with the world. The festival showcases films which reflect Orthodox Christian themes, beliefs, culture, and yes, values. Neil Basil DeGraide. His film, Queen of the Night, was nominated for Best Film, Best Director, and Best Cinematography, paying homage to the classic silent films of the 1920s. Queen of the Night is a modern fairy tale with elements of cosmic horror and beauty. Following the tragic loss of his mother, young Olive Graves has an encounter with a celestial power, and smitten by the spirit, he spends all of his resources and devotes all of his effort toward reuniting with her in the heavens above. Alexander Jovic's film, Beyond the Peak, was nominated for Best Film, Best Director, and Best Documentary. This film explores universal truths about the divine that can be found in the depths of nature. With David, the film's protagonist, he copes with the loss of his younger brother. David quickly becomes consumed with the responsibilities of ensuring his little brother's soul has a safe passage into heaven. The calling would bring him and his brother-in-law, Ranko, up Blanca's Peak. Along the way, a small community of Serbian Orthodox Christians from the St. Nicholas Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, find their serendipitous journey touching the hearts of all types of people. We've got to see all these films. We're going to talk about how we can do that, and we're going to speak to a few of the people that are here, especially the one who began it all, and that's Hristos. Hristos, welcome again. It's good to see you after so many years. Before we get into the films for the year, give us an introduction of the Byzanfest. What is it? Why did you create it? How has it developed over the years?
No, thank you, Barbara. It's a huge pleasure to be speaking here today. In just a nutshell, I'll keep it as short as possible. Byzanfest was something which there were several reasons that came about. I have an organization called Transfigured Media, which I started in 2008, which was about supporting Orthodox filmmakers and artists. But my biggest passion has always been film. And I thought to myself, well, there should be an Orthodox film festival. There are such festivals in Russia and Ukraine and in Serbia, but nothing sort of outside those countries. I had the idea originally in 2013, but I discovered that my mum had cancer, advanced breast cancer, and that put a bit of a damper on that idea. And it wasn't until witnessing her treatment and realizing that even though I wasn't the one battling the disease, that I needed to find something to help me cope with that very difficult time. And I came back to the idea of the festival, and in 2014, it started, and thank God my mother now is in remission, which is a huge relief. And the festival primarily was a streaming festival, because back in 2013, it was very popular to do that. And then 2014, I thought, do the same principle and do it as like a bit of a test to see, if we can go to that next stage of cinema screenings. So I ran it for a few years, and then of course, COVID hit. I had been doing physical screenings, but then it basically had to go all the way back to being a streaming-only film festival. The festival doesn't just simply show films, it's both cinema and online, but the festival also hopes to bring these fantastic filmmakers, such as our guests that are here today, to connect with one another, whether they're in the US or in Europe, and to work on producing more Orthodox films. The festival is basically like any other film festival that exists. It's there to encourage filmmakers to feel supported and to keep working on what they're doing, because it's a very tough business, the film industry.
I'm sure it is. Well, unfortunately, when the general public, at least here in the United States, thinks of Christian films or spiritual films in general, they probably don't think about a film festival with this degree of talent on display. That's not a criticism of any particular film, just a reputation that has developed over the last, I would say, several decades, that Christian films are not at the same level artistically as other mainstream or even independent films. I believe that widespread popularity of the recent film, Man of God, has offered another perspective on Christian films, and of course, our beloved saints to the general public, which is really a huge positive step forward. It seems to me that the diversity and the artistry showcased in films like the ones featured here have the potential to continue challenging those beliefs about deep religious and spiritual films and what we have to offer. Can you speak about that part of it?
I would love to, actually. So I'll keep it as brief as I can. I do agree with you, Father, that in general, especially like just Christian cinema, they tend to have a reputation for being cheesy and preachy. Orthodox cinema, it's very different to that perception. Orthodox cinema, in my opinion, and from what I've been observing over the years, and when even if you go as far back as Tarkovsky's films, is that Orthodox cinema, which is inspired greatly by our spiritual lives, because that permeates not just our spiritual life, but also our work life and our personality. Orthodox filmmaking is very multi-layered. It doesn't just simply also have a spiritual message, but it also looks at history, looks at culture, looks at time, looks at everything. Orthodox cinema is very multi-layered and very just weaves all these different tapestries together. The most important thing is that the Orthodox filmmaker has that Orthodox lens, that how they view the world is with an Orthodox approach, because the same as saying what makes a lawyer Orthodox or what makes a doctor Orthodox. It's how they approach their profession and how they treat others. And I feel that filmmaking and even artistry in general is very much the same principles.
Neil, let me come to you now. And you decided to take a very, I would say, unusual approach with your film, Queen of the Night. It's made in the style of 1920 silent films, all in black and white. What made you decide to take that approach for the story?
Well, for one, I wasn't really thinking about it as like even something that would be considered an Orthodox film festival. I am an Orthodox Christian. That is my worldview. That is, I see the incarnation of Christ as my interpretive lens to understand everything I see. And so when I went to the silent film decision, was kind of an easy one for me because my story took place in that time. When I had finished the screenplay and I looked at the screenplay, I'm like, if I try to do this as a modern film, this is $100 million budget. So that's not going to work because I don't have that kind of money, but I also don't like let money be an excuse. So really it kind of it crystallized into this idea of doing a silent film because my main occupation is a composer and my wife and I have a band and that's our income. So it was like, oh, this is a great way to do this. I can introduce it to my fan base. All of our records have been storytelling records. And I felt like I had a story I really believed in. So we went through the trouble of figuring out how to make a film. I've been a visual artist for a long time as well, so it wasn't that big of a departure. I had some work in animation as well. So we set out to do it. And it's funny because I'm not really a big fan of green screen films. Like a lot of these Marvel films, to me, they don't feel real. But my film didn't have to feel real. It's supposed to be expressionistic and impressionistic. And, when you look at those old films, they would have these two-dimensional, like hand-painted backgrounds. And that was very simple to do for me after the fact, through a mixture of photography and digital paintings I did to create the sets for the film. So I ended up doing a lot of it myself. I had some help. But the silent film was just, the other problem was, just if I go quickly, silent films weren't really that huge of an interest. Didn't really interest me because I hadn't experienced them like people would have back then. So when you watch a silent film now, a lot of times there's like a cheaper like music overlaid to it, like some, like it's a grandmother on a piano banging along to the film, and it's kind of disengaging. But I didn't realize, but when those movies used to premiere back then, they would have a full orchestra scoring it and doing the sound effects live, and it would be a big event. You'd go to one of these wonderful like ornate theaters like they don't make anymore, and get this experience. So I really wanted to match the idea that people do have a different attention span for different types of art, but I also wanted to be true to the silent film. So I try to bridge the gap between keeping that modern person engaged throughout the film at the same time as like paying homage to these beautiful works of art.
Well, my hat's off to all of you that create these things, because it is truly a work of art. I know the soundtrack for the film was entirely created by a band that you are a part of.
Yes.
Dirk Robbins, is that
correct?
correct?
No, I played every bit of music you hear on that.
Okay.
Film. Yeah.
Wow.
Was it always your plan to create the music for the film? Would you say the film is based around the music, vice versa? How did it develop?
Yeah. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like, a film scorer is looking for someone who's made a film to score. I made a film so I could score it in a way. So it's kind of backwards in that capacity. But at the same time, there's I don't even know how to say it. So we do concept records, so like I grew up listening to stuff like Pink Floyd, and they had The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon, and bands like Radiohead with OK Computer. And there were all these, when I realized the record had a backstory to it, it always engaged me more. And I always liked the challenge of that as a songwriter. So yeah, we've been doing concept records for a long time, and it just felt like a natural extension of what we were doing, where we were, not just going to imply the story this time. We're going to lay it out there for people to actually see it and experience it.
Okay. And you mentioned, of course, the prism or the lens which you look through. The film is described as a modern fairy tale, but the themes are very spiritual. Can you talk a little bit about your main character, the spiritual experiences, how the theme was found in the film, maybe relatable to an Orthodox audience?
Oh yeah, that's exactly that. But that's where it came from. So prior to being an Orthodox Christian, I didn't really understand the spiritual life. I would have to say I was very familiar with the Bible. I was very, I would say even in love with the person of Christ. But I kind of was under this understanding that like I was kind of a Gnostic, I would have to say. I didn't really understand spiritual practices. I didn't understand how to control my own obsessions and my own appetites. And I was kind of under this impression that when I was thinking, I was alone in my thoughts. But as I started to read some of the church fathers and realized that like every time you think, there's spiritual warfare going on, there's a spiritual tug of war that's happening. And also that there is a way as a spiritual person to gauge your appetite so they're not used against you, your passions so they're not used against you. And so in this story, it really deals with this problem of obsession. So there's Oliver Graves, my main character, is dealing with this idea that it's almost like he's aiming too high. He's fallen in love with something he shouldn't be pursuing. And in a very, if I was going to give it like, kind of a junior high school metaphor, it's like he fell for a girl and started ignoring all his friends and treating them poorly. And at the same time in this story, while this leader, this technocrat of Oliver Graves is obsessed with the moon and the spirit behind the moon, the culture is falling into, they're giving over to their appetites because they've lost the bigger picture. They've lost the bigger story. Something that's like happened with this sort of modern secular materialism where, we've been taught in schools growing up and been taught by our culture that oh, the spiritual things, those aren't real, and it's silly to hold those presuppositions. But yet what people are being told is just absolutely nihilistic, depressing, and thank God we can't fully embody these ideas, because we still get the sense that there's something transcendent to life, and there's something beautiful. So hopefully in my art and what I'm doing, I can help people reawaken that. Not by reducing it to something small and understandable. I think as an Orthodox Christian, I think if I could really explain what that means, then it wouldn't be what I say it is. In other words, you have to live inside of it. You have to sit down at the table and have the meal to understand it. At the same time, I hopefully the art is opening a window into a bigger, greater reality, even though it's not directly a Bible story or directly about a saint. But hopefully people, one of the things that awakened me to my own condition was the idea that I would give myself rules. I would give myself good things to do, and I couldn't enforce them in myself. And so that's when I started to realize something different's going on. And that's in a large way what's at play in this story.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It was an accident that happened at work.
Nobody in the family, including David, had time to say their piece with Zachary.
I had to help my brother in some way. I felt called to the mountain, and I knew that there was a spiritual force there.
It was just almost a desperation to go to the mountain to pray for his brother.
Long live Zachary's spirit. I hope that he has a wonderful ascent.
I knew that it was a calling.
And then you realize, wow, the power of prayer is really there.
It was time to start St. Nicholas Mountain Climbing Club.
Dylan, you just did your 5th 14er.
So this year you're attempting to perform the highest liturgy service on a mountain for the Serbian Orthodox Church. How do you plan on doing that?
Climbing the mountain, for me, was life-changing. I do believe that this is a place to find purpose for our life here on earth.
Let me go to Alexander next. Alexander, you created a documentary film about a man named David who set off on a quest after losing his brother. And it ended up as a really compelling story about the group of Orthodox men from a church right here in the United States of America. How did you first hear this story and become connected with the St. Nicholas community?
Well, thank you for having me here. Well, I became connected to the St. Nicholas community. I actually had a personal connection with Father Dragan, one of the characters of the film. I met him at church camp many years ago when he was a much younger priest, and he was kind of like counseling us spiritually and like teaching us lessons and things like that through camp culture, and always kind of stayed close with him. And he was he ended up becoming parish priest in Indianapolis, Indiana. And at the time I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in Ohio, in Cincinnati, and then his actual biological father became our parish priest. So we were always kind of like in orbit of each other. Pretty much we would see each other at least once a year at church camp when I was growing up in my teenage years, and just kind of stayed in touch ever since then, because we just kind of we developed a bond from an early age. Fast forward to like 2012, I think I graduated college around that year and was just filmmaking, freelancing, kind of hustling, trying to find ways to practice my craft, like try to earn some income and whatnot, and like get out there. And it's kind of hard when you're working in the Midwest and starting out as a freelancer, because you have to basically make all your new contacts. And this is not necessarily a big film town. But early on, I think I ran into Father Dragan again and told him like, what am I up to these days and whatnot. And I think I filmed a video for like a school or something like that, or I don't know. Basically, he commissioned me or told me to come up to do another church camp, but actually film it and make a little micro documentary. And then I know at the time I was working full time at another production company. And so I was like, yes, I'd love to. I'd love anything you want to like help you out, help get the message out. And like this was like, oh, I can like experiment and make a documentary, like a short film that I've never done before. So I did it, and it came out pretty nicely. It actually was quite popular within the community. But we always think, again, we stayed in touch, and then I haven't heard from it. And then I was going to move to Los Angeles in 2016, or I was moving to LA in 2016, and he just like hits me up on a whim. And he was saying like, he's like, Alex, I have this like mountain climbing club or whatever. They like go out into nature, they connect with God in nature, they go pray on top of mountains. Like, you should come. They are in our parish, and you should come and interview them, and you should talk to them. And he was like so excited, and like the lines breaking up half the time. So I'm just like, what is this man talking about? Where did he find mountain climbers in Indianapolis of all places? It's flat. There's no mountains over there. So I'm like, how did he find mountain climbers in Indianapolis? So I said, okay, I'll be there. Even though like I was literally gonna move that week or whatever. So I delayed my trip like 1 week or whatnot to go see what's going on over here. So I got there, and I was just kind of amazed. David basically started talking to me after the liturgy. I met them at liturgy, and then we kind of got lunch afterwards at the church hall. And he just kind of started telling me a story, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, this story is like, this is like wild. Like, this story, like, first off, like, why do you go out to mountains? He kept talking about like the story, which is the movie. And I'm sitting there trying to comprehend it, and I keep asking like, well, why this? Why that? How did you get to here? What's going on here? Like, I don't get it. Like, it seems really, like, my initial thought was like, this is super odd. Like, you guys are going out to climb mountains to connect with God. Like, I guess the church like isn't good enough for you or something like that. Like, what's going on here? So, but there was a genuine, even though I was like kind of laughing and joking and like teasing him about it, like there was a genuine curiosity because he was so earnest about like, what's this all about? So I did end up sitting them down finally, and then we did the interviews that day, and I was just like I was just blown away. And it dawned on me when I finished those interviews, and I was like, I don't know what's on this hard drive, but I hope there's enough material, because like what you told me, I'm gonna go make a short film, like little recruitment video for you now, but like honestly, David, like this is a feature film. Like, if you and I go film Act 3 next year, like we have a feature film kind of thing. And if there's enough material right here, right now, that this story is more than just like the spoken word, that there is an actual like movie element to it, we can do it. And like, sure enough, like that first like couple of climbs, he filmed enough footage, like especially the first one was like a ton. Like when him and Ronco did that first initial climb for Zachary, like that was so wild to just see like what these two men did to just kind of just say a prayer at the top of the mountain in memory of Zachary. And that prayer basically like changed David's life and got him back into mountain climbing because he felt such a deep spiritual connection in the mountains. There is definitely a stronger feeling of like, I don't know, like being one with the universe. It's like being, unlike, I don't know, like Western cultures, like being one with the universe, but it's same thing with like spirituality. Like you feel that same energy, even like thinking about God and like what he has created. Like, this is nature, this is what he was made, and this is also untouched by man. Because like everything that like man has done over the hundreds of thousands of years has been great. We've made so many advances in technology to make our lives easier, more comfortable. But in some sense, when you go out into nature, you are now actually reconnecting with the world, with the natural world, with the spiritual world, where I think that lacks in our modern day life and society. No matter how much we try, I think there's just too much distraction. And that, I mean, it could be obviously distraction from like vices, or to something being like simply distraction of like our daily struggles in life, or just getting pinged constantly on our cell phone, that we can't just kind of sit down and like take a breath.
I mean, what do you think some of the takeaways could be for the viewers about building strong Orthodox community, maybe even processing grief rather than in isolation? Say that again. What do you think some of the takeaways are for viewers about building strong Orthodox communities, maybe about processing grief together rather than in isolation?
I think with building strong Orthodox communities, that was kind of like one of the first things that appealed to me about this film was that they built a community. And I feel like just growing up, when I realized that I was going to be embarking on this film, I was like, well, one of my big things I wanted to talk about was like community and how these guys basically formed a community through these mountain climbing trips. Like they're kind of like guys trips, but they have guys trips with a purpose where like they were trying to go there to like build their faith and connect with God, but also as a group. And I think that makes it more special. And it doesn't have to be something as extreme as mountain climbing. I think you could do other forms of activities, but like maybe like just like a trip away from the city or something, going on, I think, an adventure with like your fellow like Orthodox brothers and sisters and like experiencing things new, but maybe trying to bring in God into that as a reminder of like what we can be grateful for and like this time together that we get to spend. I mean, I think that's a big special thing. I think the big thing, that the key takeaway from David's story is that he was grieving. He was in extreme grief because the poor man, he didn't have the best relationship with his brother, and so, but he loved his brother. And when Zachary passed away, it was a big shock to him, because it's like, well, I can never actually maybe repair or work on my relationship with my brother anymore. And I think that's very devastating if that is big meaning, being a family man, if that means a lot to you. I mean, I know for me, that would be huge and detrimental. And so by him taking on that first trip, I think that was a very positive way to like a therapy or coping with his grief kind of thing, like kind of going out into nature. In the beginning of the film, as you go on that first trip with him, he's really, I mean, he's just in some way, he's isolating himself with his brother-in-law, but in a way, he's finding a quiet place to just kind of process his thoughts, where it's not very populated areas. So it's
Nature
really
has a way of doing that. Nature definitely has a way of doing that.
So I thought like, I think that's a big thing, even for anyone. Like if you're feeling down, like I have to like remind myself, like go outside, get out of your house, like go climb. I have like a mountain in my backyard. Go on a hike in the backyard. So
You don't live in Indianapolis.
no, I do not. I have mountains now.
You have mountains. Well, look, I want to thank all of you for being here today. All of these films, I believe, are now available to stream virtually until December 18th. Hristos, can you tell us how viewers can see these and other films through your festival?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is to go to byzanfest.com, and you'll see the link, which will take you to where you can watch these feature films. And some of them are for free. Queen of the Night is for free, and Beyond the Peak is a 24-hour digital rental, as a few others are. So just go through that. And also we have our short film collection too, which is on the website too, and you can watch that completely for free on YouTube. And you have until the 18th, 19th US time, because when I say 18th, it's really Australian Eastern time, but being in America, it's, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you again for what you're doing. I think it's magnificent. And whether it's not orthodoxy sort of in your face, we know that Orthodox Christianity always baptizes the culture in the country it enters. So whether it be music or culture or things that are happening, that all plays a part in our senses. We know that Orthodox Christianity really bombards the senses of the human being, and the senses are the windows into the soul. So whatever you can see here will be of value. And I urge everyone to go and visit that site. Thank you for being with us.